Alright, Jalok here again, September 22nd, 2016. I'm taking another look here at the real Hebrew language. Now, I'm probably the last one to be dealing with a topic like this, but I think I've put out 2 or 3 videos on it so far. And I'm telling you, I've been really thinking about the Hebrew language and our scrolls, right? Them making us feel like they gave us the real scrolls in what we call the Bible today, right? And I'm saying somewhere along the line we lost the scrolls and the language. They're telling us, oh, we got the scrolls and the Dead Sea Scrolls found by a Bedouin boy, that was hidden by the Essenes in the Qumran caves. It proves that the scrolls we have, that the Bible we have, is the true word of Israel of Bible times. And they're telling us, yeah, the Hebrew we have, this is a real language restored and so on. I'm not sure how to prove it all yet, but I think both of those are wrong. And I'm telling you, eventually as I look into it, I'm going to either give the person who can prove it enough information by my digging and asking questions. So someone who knows more and can put it together more than me will say, okay, you got a point right there, you got a point right there, and they're going to prove it. Or I'm going to prove it myself by my digging and searching. Something is wrong with the scrolls, and I mentioned already that the Most High said the pen of the scribes is in vain. And he talks also about those fake scribes and priests and so on, right? The false ones that had sold out and were doing evil. In the book of Ezekiel and even in Jeremiah chapter 23 and so on, right? At different places, right? Something went wrong. Look at even Samuel's sons started to corrupt themselves with the priesthood, making money off it, right? No different from the average preacher today selling out the word of the Most High for money, right? So I'm telling you, something is wrong with the scrolls and with the language that they've given to us. I'm looking here, I've been thinking of the Canaanite and Phoenician and Samaritan Hebrew. Listen to this from Wikipedia. It says here, Samaritan Hebrew is a reading tradition as used liturgical. By the way, you notice you notice there's so many kinds of Hebrew and scripts and so on. It's like, it's just like, when you're reading and studying, you come upon so many different kinds of Hebrew. And even up until modern times here, you got Yiddish. If Hebrew is that powerful and is the language of the Most High, why did someone feel a need to create Yiddish? For what damn reason? Anyway, it says here, Samaritan Hebrew is a reading tradition as used liturgically by the Samaritans for reading the ancient Hebrew language of the Samaritan Pentateuch, in contrast to biblical Hebrew, the language of the Masoretic Jewish Pentateuch. Now, you see more than one poem right there, right? In just that one paragraph. The Samaritans are using the Samaritan Hebrew as a reading tradition. So right away they got their own special way to go about reading the text. What was wrong with the old way of reading it, right? They were using this special Hebrew that just came up for reading the ancient Hebrew language. Why couldn't they have just read the ancient Hebrew language the way the ancient Hebrew language was always being read? And you see, It's easy to say, well, it got lost somewhere. That's my problem. At every point you're going to say, well, it's because it got lost. Well, the moment it's getting lost, why is it that the people living at that time when it's supposedly being lost don't just continue to read it anyway? It's like, let's say I'm living, let's just pick a number. Let's just say 1000 BC. The real language of the Hebrews are being lost. Why don't the people in 1000 BC just continue to read like that? Or the people 100 years later just continue, and 50 years later just continue to use it, realizing that the language has died? You see, what I'm trying to tell you is that if the language is being lost, so somebody is to start to read something else, it's really saying to you that someone is masterminding the loss of the language of the Hebrews. And the new language that's coming in is being read by the people who are being set up to read in the new version of the language to get rid of the old language. That's what I'm trying to tell you. People are trying to get rid of what was ancient. And who are those people who usually do that? The rulers. The evil kings. The overcoming army from the next empire and so on, right? That's what I'm telling you. So when they get rid of the language and then another language comes up and they tell you it is still Hebrew, at best it would be a watered down Hebrew or a sister or a cousin of that which was. A cousin of the language kind of thing. You see that? So they're saying here, they use this Samaritan Hebrew for reading the ancient Hebrew language. We here are trying to find out the ancient language, so we want to speak it and we want to learn it and study it. Why are those people way back then not trying to do the same? Instead, they just switch to some other Samaritan Hebrew to read the ancient Hebrew language, as if it didn't matter as much to them to read the ancient Hebrew language the way it always was. So they use it to read the ancient Hebrew language in contrast to biblical Hebrew language of the Masoretic text. All that's saying to me is that there were some differences in the language, and the one that won out in the end was the newer kind, not the ancient Hebrew language. That's all that's really saying to me, right? It goes on, for the Samaritans, ancient Hebrew as a spoken everyday language became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic, which itself ceased to be a spoken language sometime between the 10th and 12th centuries, and succeeded by Arabic, or more specifically Samaritan Palestinian Arabic. I'm going to say something about this, but let me just throw in here. You see, when I see this Arabic stuff, my guess is that a heavy part of a lot of this biblical deception is coming from Arabic or from the Arabs, right? If you look on your map, you'll see something talking about Arabic Egypt. And what we were not told often enough was that the Arabs were fighting us out of Jerusalem as well. We hear about the Romans, right? But we don't hear about the Arabs, and they were there. So why is it that they are so invisible so much? We hear about the Arabs coming after us after we fled Jerusalem and we ran into Atlas Mountains or whatever, and then they came after us in Africa, in other parts there of Africa, and then later on we know that they took us into slavery. But what happened to them during the time of the Roman Empire when the Romans were pushing their swords in their belly? I mean, the Romans just sprang up out of nowhere, under the name Romans, I should say. Well, what do you think the Arabs were doing all this time? And see, the Romans just rise up like that? And the Romans just come out of thin air, almost? I mean, yeah, you're going to chase it, but I mean, under the name Romans. The Roman name just spring up out of thin air, and they just start ruling over us, lording over us, and killing us, and chasing us out of... You got to think about that, right? So, now here's a poem now. Look, you know, I mean, and this is Wikipedia too, right? For the Samaritans, ancient Hebrew as a spoken everyday language became extinct, right? Ancient Hebrew became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic. So what they're saying is that the Samaritans started using Samaritan Hebrew to read the ancient Hebrew language. And now the next paragraph is telling you basically that they did that because the Aramaic took over, right? Because the ancient Hebrew became extinct. Yet, as in my last video dealing with this Hebrew stuff, I already pointed out that when Judah went into the Babylonian captivity, historians are saying, and I read from the book in the last video, and they're saying that the people of Shem coming from Abraham and so on were speaking Aramaic, which they're saying Abraham spoke. And so that was their language. But they spoke Aramaic, but when they went into the Babylonian captivity, that's where a shift happened, and they lost their Hebrew language and started to speak Aramaic. Doesn't that sound odd to you? If you're speaking Aramaic that you got from Abraham and before, how is it that when you get into the Babylonian captivity, you lose your Hebrew and pick up Aramaic? If you go into the captivity speaking Aramaic that you got from Abraham, wouldn't you more lose the Aramaic and pick up Hebrew in Babylon? So you see a twisting, a flipping of things? They're confusing you because they are hiding the real history of the real language of the Hebrews. Something is wrong somewhere. And I can't quite figure it out yet, but something is wrong somewhere. You can't speak Aramaic, you go into Babylonian captivity and lose your Hebrew and pick up Aramaic. You would more, having gone into Babylon speaking Aramaic, you would more lose your Aramaic and come out with Hebrew. You see that? That's what I'm trying to say. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. So when you look at this here now, the Samaritans spoke this new Samaritan Hebrew because for them, the Samaritans, the ancient Hebrew became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic. You see the conflict again? Like in the last video I told you, history is showing that Aramaic was what the Israelites were speaking, which is what Abraham spoke. So they were speaking Aramaic. But here they're telling you, and so if they're speaking Aramaic, what they would have lost over time was the Aramaic and started to speak Hebrew. But here they're telling you on Wikipedia that the Samaritans are saying that the ancient Hebrew was lost. So either they should have said it was the Samaritans found that it was the Aramaic that's lost, or they're trying to tell you that ancient Hebrew is just a term that refers to Aramaic. So then, if that is correct, when we see ancient Hebrew, or at least in this document, but probably elsewhere as well, then ancient Hebrew would really just mean Aramaic, what Abraham spoke. All right, so they're saying the ancient Hebrew became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic. But you see the confusion, because that still does not make sense. Because if the ancient Hebrew is Aramaic, then what they're saying here is that the Samaritans are saying that the ancient Hebrew, which is Aramaic, became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic. How can ancient Hebrew be Aramaic and became extinct and become succeeded by itself, succeeded by the same Aramaic? Right? So they're saying the ancient Hebrew, though, at least they're saying, became extinct and was succeeded by Aramaic, or Abraham's tongue, which itself, the Aramaic that Abraham spoke, also ceased to be a spoken language sometime between the 10th and 12th centuries. So am I to understand that the ancient Hebrew became extinct, so the Samaritan Hebrew took over at this one point? But in addition to the ancient Hebrew becoming extinct, Aramaic began to be spoken, but itself also became extinct. So now we're left with Samaritan Hebrew. And so they just want to sell you this stuff. Open your mouth, let's stuff this down your throat. This Hebrew today that we have, it is the real Hebrew. It's just that we just put the vowel markings on it and so on. It cannot be. There's too much deception. This world is built on deception. It runs on deception. It runs on deception. And wherever you see so much confusing points, you know something is being hidden. Some expert at lies put their stuff into all these documents that we're reading. And that's why we got to try to figure it out. Now look at this now. The phonology of Samaritan Hebrew is highly similar to that of Samaritan Arabic. Didn't I tell you the Arabic stuff is all over into the deception regarding the history of Israel? And look at these so-called Arabs today, where I'm being told that the real Arabs are really black. But you got these so-called Arabs today, / Palestinians. They seem to be rising up in power again. Now you tell me, how can you just sit down, you're washed up, the West over here is riding high with all kinds of power and might and whatever, and money and on top, world superpower and all that. And you are painted by the West as being low down and backward and nothing, no good. But you still just rise up until now the West is fearing you? How is it that these so-called Arabs under the name of Islam are just able to just rise up with great power, just like that? Where they're just flooding into different countries now, we're scared of them in the West. How is it that they're just able to just get up like that? And the West can't seem to do anything. Yet when you look into the news and into history, you find that there are so many times when the West or so-called white people are working with these same Arabs, and even the Israelis have been working with them. And even in times past, they were living together, sharing the same religion. Judaism and Islam were like one religion or relatives. In fact, in times past, Christianity and Islam were like one religion. And both the Christian cross and the crescent moon were the same symbols on the same temples together. Islam and Christianity were together as one belief. And Islam and Judaism was also in times past as one belief, with the Star of David and the crescent moon together on people's houses and on their temples and so on in times past together. So do you have any more wondering left in you as to why they're able to rise up now under the guise of Islam and ISIS and all that kind of stuff? These people are all working together. That's why you can have so much false information on our scrolls. Everybody agreeing that, yeah, we got the right scrolls because they don't want the real Israel to know what's in the fullness of the real scrolls. And that we got the real Hebrew because they don't want us and the world to know that the real Hebrew has somehow been lost or not offered to us or is being hid. Why is it that all this information can fly around in books and on the web and so on all over, and it is just fine, it's just accepted, this is real Hebrew? Because all these power people of these power religions, these C-top religions, they are damn well working together. That's the reason why. They're working together to hide it. Read Psalms 83, we know that so very well. I mean, that's so many nations are working together, right? So that the name of Israel shall be no more. So that the Hebrew will be no more. The real Hebrew will be no more. So that the real scrolls will be hidden from us so that we will have it no more. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. They're working together. The phonology, let's see what that means. Phonology, P-H-O-N-O-L-O-G-Y. Phonology is a branch of linguistics concerned with the systematic organization of sounds in languages. That's all I need from that. Sounds in languages. So the phonology, or the sounds in the Samaritan Hebrew, is highly similar to that of Samaritan Arabic. And I started out talking about the Samaritan Hebrew. So what you're hearing here, which I said before on either the last or the first Hebrew language video, that these different Shemitic languages are so similar. It is very easy when Israel has been taken over at some point. And look how many times we were taken over. We normally think of the Babylonian and the Syrian captivity. Look how many times we were taken over even in the book of Judges. A lot of corruption could have happened all along, all those times too, right? And look how many corrupt priests we had when the nation really got set up properly. All in the book of Ezekiel and so on, right? So what you see is that these different Shemitic languages that look like the Hebrew or the Aramaic, they use similar kinds of characters, similar letters and so on. It's not hard for the nations that hated Israel and still do to this day. It would not have been hard for them when they had us under their power in captivity, or even when we weren't in captivity but our priests and scribes were slacking off and selling out to them, for them to have convinced our scribes and our priests to slip in these false letters and this fake Hebrew and so on. It wouldn't have been hard. Because people are gullible. And if you just change one letter here and in another 100 years you change another letter, pretty soon the real Hebrew just gets changed over time. And you just think this is the real Hebrew that we have now. So you see what I'm saying? So you got the Samaritan Hebrew, then you got the ancient Hebrew, then you got what they call the paleo-Hebrew, and then you got this Samaritan ancient Hebrew, the Aramaic. Now you're hearing about the Samaritan Arabic. And they're all similar, it seems. And you're telling me these people that hate Israel, who are speaking these different kinds of Shemitic languages, it's never going to occur to them to mess up our language, especially when our priests and scribes have already sold out to them? Listen, I'm going to get somewhere with some of these videos, I tell you, right? I'm going to get somewhere. Because I just want people to see something, right? You see, deception runs this world. And if the Most High is saying He's going to restore the language to us, And he's going to give, let me read that scripture. Let me just read that. Hold on. Let's run over to Jeremiah. We know it, yeah. But new people like to hear this stuff. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31. Behold, the days come, make new covenant with the house of Israel, and so on. Not according to the covenant that I made, and so on. Verse 33. This shall be the covenant I will make with them. Jeremiah 31, verse 31. No, Jeremiah 31, verse 33. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Most High, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their power, and they shall be my people. Why is he going to do that? Because a lot of chicanery has happened. A lot of trickery has happened with the way Torah has been presented to us, the way it has been taught to us, and the way it has been written down for us. So he's going to put it in our hearts so that we cannot lose it ever again, and so that we will truly know the truth of it. And no one will be able to trick us, right? It's going to be in our hearts, and we'll be able to live. It's also a way of saying, putting it in our hearts is also a way of saying we're just going to be able to live right, to live righteous, and live set apart, and so on, right? But here, verse 34, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Most High, for they shall all know me, from the least of them, right? So and no more, they're going to teach no more every man his neighbor. Why? Because a lot of trickery has happened with the scrolls and with even the Hebrew. Some are saying, no, but if you go to the Aramaic, it says it sheds more light, more information, so this is what it actually means. Yeah, it means some of what you said from this Hebrew you have, but the Aramaic adds more information to give the proper meaning. Then the next one comes, no, but you need to go to the paleo-Hebrew. This is what it's saying. And so we're teaching each other back and forth. Then somebody else says, but there's this other language and this, whatever, right? And so the Most High is going to just give us back that language, Zephaniah 3:9, restore something where the understanding just comes once and for all, and nobody needs to teach anybody else no damn perspective of their own. Because we're all going to have one consent perspective from the Most High. Because you learn something of this kind of Hebrew, and I live on the other side of the world, I learn this other kind of Hebrew, and I live over there, I learn this other, and I study this, and I know this Aramaic, and I know, and we all have some different kinds of Hebrew perspective on the language perspective, right? But today the spoken vernacular among Samaritans is evenly split between modern Israeli Hebrew. Oh God, here's another kind of Hebrew. We heard about the paleo-Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew, the Aramaic, the Samaritan Hebrew, the Arabic Hebrew, Palestinian Arabic. Now they're going to tell us about the modern Israeli Hebrew and Palestinian. Oh goodness, like how much Hebrew do we need? How much? Yeah, but this word is spelled like this. Well, in the Aramaic it has 5 letters. In this one it has 4. And that extra letter changes the meaning. And this, something is wrong somewhere. That's what I'm trying to say. So when we read the Bible now, we look up the Hebrew at the back of our Bible, or concordance and so on. So sometimes you get certain meanings that when you're looking at different Hebrew lexicon, you get a different kind of rendering of the word, meaning of the word. Or sometimes you get the same meaning but with some additional meaning as well. Why didn't the first one just give you the full meaning? Because they're probably using a different kind of Hebrew, so you get lesser understanding. Which means what? There's no one consent happening like in Zephaniah 3 verse 9. So sometimes we're teaching wrong. Some of us in some cases now, brothers just teach. They teach awesome, right? But I'm just saying sometimes we end up teaching wrong or incomplete, not because we're trying to deceive, but because that's just the information we have available. That's just the Hebrew we have access to, right? So you have access to this kind of Hebrew knowledge. The next one has access to this kind of Hebrew knowledge, and so on and so forth, right? And so it turns out like that. But Zephaniah 3:9, for then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Most High to serve him with one consent. All right. Let me get off this Wikipedia stuff and deal with this and close this out. Well, actually, let's read this first from Wikipedia. History and discovery. Oh, man. The Samaritan language, and look where they're... let me just hold myself back. The Samaritan language first became known in detail to the Western world with the publication of a manuscript of the Samaritan Pentateuch in 1631. And then after that, you see stuff coming in now like the Masoretic text and all kind of stuff. How about the Moses text? Huh? How about the Moses text? How about the Abraham text? How about all the stuff that they found in places where Abraham was known to walk? In places of Syria where they're bombing now, and they're taking whatever scrolls and so on, and they're hiding them, confiscating them. As I've heard. Whatever they found like 20, 30 years ago, and now they're going back, damaging whatever relics and so on that they find and whatever. Like, you know, how about that kind of stuff? I don't know. And look at this. Between 1957 and 1977, Ze'ev Ben-Haim published in 5 volumes his monumental work on the Hebrew and Aramaic traditions of the Samaritans. Ben-Haim, whose views prevail today, proved that modern Samaritan Hebrew is not very different from Second Temple Samaritan, which itself was a language shared with the other residents of the region before it was supplanted by Aramaic. First of all, they're saying he published 5 volumes of his monumental Hebrew work on the Hebrew and Aramaic traditions of the Samaritans. You see that? The Hebrew and Aramaic, like they're listing it like 2 different languages, right? Even though they're very similar. He's publishing this monumental work on Hebrew about the Samaritan Hebrew and the Samaritan Aramaic. Why were they using 2? Why wasn't it found that they were using just 1? Because there was a blending and mixing of stuff. Somehow things got mixed up a long time ago, right? Right? And he says his views prevail today, but the modern Samaritan Hebrew is not very different from Second Temple Samaritan, which was a language shared with the residents of the region. So they're giving us some of this guy's best works about Samaritan languages that were shared with residents of the region before it was supplanted by Aramaic. You see what that's telling you right there? The language was shared with the residents of the region. Now, he doesn't tell right here which residents he's talking, right? Which other groups. But the residents of the region were not going to be, especially since you're dealing with the Samaritans here, we know they were a problem, right? But they're bad enough on their own, just the Samaritans. They're a problem, right? When we know their history. But how much worse is it going to be with their residents? The residents in their region, right? So what you're dealing with is the Samaritans who were just a thumbs down for them, and then their residents in their region. Are you going to have any pure Hebrew or pure Aramaic there? No. No. Look at this. Samaritan Hebrew is written in the Samaritan alphabet, a direct descendant of the paleo-Hebrew alphabet, which in turn, as if it doesn't want to stop there, is a variant of the earlier Phoenician alphabet. So you got a derivative of this, a descendant of that, another variant of this and that. Guess me this riddle and perhaps not. You see what I'm trying to tell you? Why does Samaritan Hebrew need to be a direct descendant of the paleo-Hebrew alphabet? If the paleo-Hebrew was so powerful, why didn't it just continue to happen? Continue to survive? Why wasn't it just used? Because everybody who takes over is going to change up shit. Right? Now, if you get these modern Israeli Jews today telling you, oh, you're reading from the King James, you can't understand because you're not reading from our Hebrew Bible. You're not reading from it. What they're telling you is that only in their Hebrew Bibles can you read correctly what the Most High says. So where did their Hebrew come from? Well, I'll tell you what. I gotta hold that back as well. But basically, if they're telling you they don't like your Bible, your King James, and you're like, well, I'll read it from the Hebrew. They're like, ah, we don't like that either. You gotta read it from our books and from our Talmud and from our whatever, right? They're telling you that they got a kind of Hebrew that is just right. And you're telling me that we're supposed to trust that as well? Because their Hebrew and what they're giving us today, that they're going off, well, this modern Hebrew that we have is just set up by one man who himself was an Israeli Jew, right? The father of the Hebrew language, they call him, I can't remember his name. And he put up this modern Hebrew language together to let it be widely accepted the way it is today. So you're telling me one man who was not a son of Jacob, and not a part of the Psalm 147, 19 and 20, where the Most High gave his word to Jacob. This one man, an Israeli Jew who worked for Zionism to put together this modern Hebrew, he set that up and it just became widespread, and now the whole world knows, yeah, Hebrew language restored in Israel. This one man did. Now, no person of our people of Jacob did it, but he did it. And we're supposed to just accept that? That this is really the real Hebrew that we got today? No. No. Look up the guy, the father of modern Hebrew. Let me see him again if I can find his name. Father of modern Hebrew language. Let me see if I can find his name so you guys can look him up. Revival of the Hebrew, father of the modern. Let's see. I know I'm keeping you guys long, but you know this thing is really bothering me. So whoever wants to listen to it, you know. Thanks as well to the people who have made some comments or suggestions regarding this Hebrew. Thanks. I hear your comments and so on. I'm really glad at least, people are paying attention. Even on Twitter where I'm really at, people are mentioning things. They're contacting me about this, right? Helping me with it. So I'm really thankful to all of you, whether it's from YouTube or Twitter, that you make some contact with me about this Hebrew, because I'm telling you, it's really bothering me. The intriguing story. Okay, this page isn't working right. It's not moving. What's the guy's name again, man? It's funny when I didn't need it. Okay, yeah. I think it's Eliezer ben Yehuda. Oh man. Eliezer ben Yehuda, yeah. Look him up, you'll see the revival of Hebrew, right? This guy worked as a part of the whole Zionism setup, right? And helped to set up the language, right? This was his job when they're setting up Israel, right? To go back in the land and so on, and they made up Hebrew names, even if the people coming off the boats to become Israeli, known as Israeli Jews, they made up Hebrew names for them, right? Which is something that the Most High said we would be changing our name back. Well, they made up their names as well too. But look it up. Eliezer ben Yehuda, Eliezer ben Yehuda, father of the modern Hebrew language. So, yeah, I mean it's a lot there, right? So some of these languages there are really so close. Any kind of switch could have happened a long time ago, right? Any kind of switch, right? The scripts were so close together and so on, sometimes in the way that they were written. Yeah, it would have been easy, right? Now you're hearing up the Assyrian script that, I mean, it's just, goodness. Now, okay, all right, I'm gonna just close it here. I was gonna make another point, but I'm already long enough with this, so I'm gonna save the rest for another time. In another video now, another lesson on this same Hebrew language topic. I'm gonna talk about um, the problem with the Hebrew language based on us losing it in captivity, because they said we lost language in captivity, right? There was a switch. So I'm going to talk about the problem with the scrolls and the language being lost in times of captivity, and will show that you really should have some reasonable doubt when it comes to whether or not we've got the real language that our ancient people spoke and the real proper or complete scrolls, right? Maybe there really are more than 66 books, and maybe some of these have been tampered with in some kind of way, right? So I'm going to show from a common sense way with history that there is a problem with our scrolls, either with it being changed or with it just simply being withheld from us and us given a lesser form. So it might not be that the scrolls are wrong that we have now, which we call the Bible, the Old Testament. It could just simply mean there being a problem with the scrolls might just simply mean that they didn't give us the rest of the books, right? So I'm not necessarily saying that, but it seems that it was tampered with at some point, especially since the Most High says the scribes, their pen is in vain. He was saying it that way because they were writing stuff, right? Polluting the scrolls, basically, you could say. So I'm going to show that in the next one, and that's not going to be hard. I know nobody's going to fight me on that one, because I'm going to just it's just going to be so plain, we're all going to just see it, because we all know it already. I'm just going to be regurgitating it. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks again.